In our fast-paced, constantly changing world, fear often finds its way into our lives, sometimes even before we realize it. It might be a fear of failure, fear of the unknown, or fear of losing something or someone dear to us. But have you ever stopped to consider that the very fear we experience is an illusion, a product of our mind clinging to ideas and expectations? What if I told you that fear, just like everything else in this world, is temporary, fleeting, and ultimately out of our control? This isn't just a theoretical concept. This is the core of what the ancient Buddhist teachings have to offer us in today's modern world. In Buddhism, we learn that everything is impermanent, every emotion, every experience, and yes, even fear itself. Understanding this can completely transform the way we respond to the world around us. But how do we shift our mindset to embrace impermanence rather than fight against it? How can we navigate fear, suffering, and uncertainty with greater clarity and peace? Today, we're going to explore the transformative power of Buddhist mindfulness practices that can help us manage and even overcome the fear and suffering we often face. We will dive into essential Buddhist principles that show us how to understand suffering as a universal human experience, how to let go of attachments that cause us pain, and how to cultivate patience and mindfulness that bring us back to the present moment, where true freedom resides. What if, by embracing impermanence, we could release our fear of the unknown and live more fully in the present moment? And what if we could transform the way we relate to our emotions, particularly fear, and use them as stepping stones to greater self-awareness and spiritual growth? Join me on this journey to explore how Buddhist teachings can help us conquer fear, let go of attachments, and cultivate a life of inner peace. Through the lens of mindfulness, we'll take a deeper look at how fear thrives in the past and future but vanishes when we return to the present moment. We'll also explore how suffering, though universal, doesn't need to isolate us. It can connect us to others and remind us that we're all human. This isn't just philosophy. This is practical wisdom that can help you find peace in the middle of chaos. As we explore these powerful teachings, I encourage you to reflect on your own life and consider how you respond to fear and attachment. Could letting go bring you more peace? Can mindfulness help you break free from the cycle of fear and anxiety that holds you back? These are some of the questions we'll answer as we move through today's video. Fear often arises from our natural tendency to cling to the illusion of permanence. We live in a world that is constantly changing, yet we seek stability, predictability, and control. This desire for permanence is deeply rooted in our attachments to people, situations, success, and even our emotions. We fear change because it threatens the sense of security that comes from our belief in the unchanging nature of the world. However, one of the most profound lessons in Buddhist philosophy is the acceptance of impermanence, or anicca, which teaches us that everything, every experience, every relationship, every fear is transient. Nothing is permanent, including the very fears that grip us. By embracing impermanence, we not only release the anxiety of attachment, but we also gain the freedom to live fully in the present moment. In our everyday lives, fear often feels like a constant companion, something that is always with us, lurking in the background, can feel like a weight that we carry, an insurmountable force that controls our thoughts and actions. Yet, fear, like everything else, is temporary, comes and it goes, often in cycles, rising like a wave in the ocean, and eventually receding, just as we would not panic when a wave rises. Understanding the nature of fear as impermanent allows us to respond to it with calmness and clarity. A powerful example of embracing impermanence and overcoming fear can be seen in the life of someone like Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Bezos' journey to success was not a linear path, but one filled with significant risks, setbacks, and challenges. At the outset, Amazon was not the giant it is today, and there were countless moments where its future seemed uncertain. In fact, There were moments when Bezos himself must have felt the crushing weight of fear, the fear that his vision might not succeed, that his company might fail, or that he might lose everything he had worked for. However, Bezos understood that fear is temporary, much like the changing tides of the ocean. By embracing the impermanence of both his successes and failures, he was able to navigate these challenges without allowing fear to paralyze him. His acceptance of the transience of both good and bad times allowed him to stay focused on long-term goals, weathering the storms that come with entrepreneurship. The Buddhist concept of impermanence directly challenges the illusion that we can hold onto anything forever. Everything is in a constant state of flux. Our bodies change, our relationships evolve, our emotions shift, and even our thoughts are fleeting. When we cling to the idea that things should remain the same, we set ourselves up for suffering. Fear arises from this attachment to permanence. We fear losing what we love, failing to meet expectations, or facing uncertainty in the future. But when we accept that all things are temporary, including fear itself, we free ourselves from the anxiety that comes with attachment. We no longer need to control every aspect of our lives, because we understand that change is inevitable. This freedom allows us to fully experience the present moment without the burden of fear dictating our every decision. Consider the late Steve Jobs, whose life was a testament to the power of embracing impermanence. Throughout his career, Jobs faced multiple setbacks, including being ousted from the company he co-founded, Apple. His return to Apple in 1997 marked the beginning of one of the most remarkable comebacks in business history. Jobs was able to navigate these tumultuous periods not by clinging to the idea of permanence, but by embracing change. He understood that both success and failure were temporary, and that the key to his success lay in adapting to change and staying focused on his long-term vision. By letting go of attachment to the past and focusing on the present moment, Jobs was able to make bold decisions that transformed the tech industry. His ability to embrace impermanence allowed him to face the fear of failure without letting it derail his vision. When we begin to see fear as an illusion, a temporary state that arises from our attachment to the idea of permanence, we can begin to let go of the grip it has on us. Fear often manifests in our minds as a mental projection, a worst-case scenario that we imagine could happen in the future. This projection, however, is rarely based on reality. Most of the time, the things we fear never come to pass. The Buddha taught that fear is often a product of our minds creating scenarios based on past experiences or imagined future outcomes. By questioning the validity of our fears and recognizing them as mental constructs, we can dissolve their power over us. Just as a wave rises and falls in the ocean, our fears can come and go if we allow them to pass without clinging to them. A contemporary figure who exemplifies this understanding of fear as an illusion is Elon Musk. As the CEO of both Tesla and SpaceX, Musk has faced immense pressure, scrutiny, and fear throughout his career. His ventures, particularly SpaceX, were initially seen as highly risky and even foolish by many, yet Musk did not let fear dictate his actions. Instead, he understood that the fear of failure was temporary and could be overcome by taking calculated risks and staying focused on the bigger picture. In fact, Musk has spoken about the role of fear in innovation, noting that the most significant breakthroughs often come from pushing past the fear of failure. By reframing fear as something to be managed rather than something to be avoided, Musk has built some of the most successful and ambitious companies in the world. The Buddha's teachings on fear align closely with the notion that mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the moment, can help us overcome our fears. Fear often thrives in the past and future, in the what-ifs and the maybes. But when we bring our attention back to the present moment, we realize that in this moment, we are safe. Mindfulness allows us to step outside the whirlwind of fear and observe it from a place of calm awareness. In the present moment, there is no danger. There is only the reality of what is happening right now. By practicing mindfulness, we can distance ourselves from the storm of fear, watching it rise and fall without being swept away by it. One of the most influential figures in the world of mindfulness is Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk. Thich Nhat Hanh has spoken extensively about the role of mindfulness in overcoming fear and anxiety. He teaches that when we are mindful, we are no longer controlled by our thoughts or emotions. Instead, we can observe them from a place of equanimity. For example, when faced with fear, mindfulness allows us to acknowledge the fear without judgment, and then release it. Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings on mindfulness show us that fear is not something we must fight against, but something we can simply observe and let go of. This leads us to another key Buddhist principle that helps in overcoming fear: the practice of non-attachment. Attachment is often the root of fear. We fear losing what we are attached to, whether it be a relationship, possession, or an idea of success. The more tightly we hold on to something, the more we fear losing it. But the Buddha taught that true freedom comes from letting go of attachment. Attachment to outcomes, to possessions, and even to relationships breeds anxiety and fear. Just as holding sand too tightly causes it to slip through our fingers, so too does clinging to anything in life create fear. By letting go of our attachments, we open ourselves to the fluidity of life, embracing whatever comes our way without the fear of loss. The former President of the United States, Barack Obama, provides a powerful example of non-attachment in his leadership style. Obama's tenure was marked by moments of crisis, from economic downturns to international conflicts. Yet, Obama did not let fear of failure or the fear of losing his legacy define his actions. He understood that success and failure are both temporary. His calm and composed demeanor during times of great uncertainty was not a result of a lack of fear, but of his ability to detach from the outcomes and focus on the present moment. Obama's non-attachment to specific results allowed him to navigate difficult situations with clarity and grace, offering a powerful lesson in how letting go of the need to control everything can reduce fear and anxiety. Ultimately, the key to overcoming fear lies in understanding its nature and its impermanence. Fear is not a permanent condition. It is a temporary emotional response to perceived threats, many of which are not based in reality. By embracing the truth of impermanence, practicing mindfulness, and letting go of attachment, we can face fear with greater clarity and calm, just as we would not fear the rising and falling of waves in the ocean. We can learn to accept fear as a natural part of life that will pass in its own time. When we stop clinging to the illusion of permanence, we free ourselves from the anxiety that fear creates and open ourselves to the fullness of life in the present moment. Suffering and fear are central to the human experience. They are not isolated phenomena, but deeply interconnected aspects of our psychological and emotional lives. These two emotions often arise from the same source: attachment. Attachment to things, people, outcomes, and even ideas creates a sense of security and stability. But when these attachments are threatened, suffering and fear inevitably follow. The Buddhist understanding of suffering, as outlined in the Four Noble Truths, offers profound insight into how these emotions function and how we can transform them. The first truth, that life is inherently filled with suffering, is not a pessimistic view but an invitation to examine the nature of human experience more deeply. By understanding the root causes of suffering and fear, we can begin to break free from their grip and lead a more liberated life. At its core, suffering arises from attachment. We attach ourselves to what we want and fear losing, whether it is our relationships, careers, possessions, or even our sense of identity. The very act of attachment creates an expectation that these things will remain constant. However, the reality is that everything in life is impermanent. Our attachment to permanence creates the conditions for suffering. As we inevitably face change, loss, and uncertainty, fear is a reaction to this impermanence. a mental projection of what might happen if we lose what we value. It is a natural response, but one that can be addressed through understanding and mindfulness. Consider the case of someone like Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. Bezos built one of the most successful companies in the world, and with it, he amassed immense wealth and influence, yet his success did not protect him from the inevitable challenges and fears that come with such a high level of responsibility. In fact, one of the key aspects of Bezos' leadership is his ability to embrace uncertainty and navigate fear. In interviews, he has spoken about the importance of taking risks and accepting that failure is part of the process. Fear, in Bezos' view, is often rooted in an attachment to the idea of success. When we attach ourselves to a particular outcome, we are bound to experience fear when that outcome is threatened. By releasing attachment to any specific result, Bezos has been able to make bold decisions that have propelled Amazon to new heights. This ability to face fear head-on and detach from the need for certainty is a key lesson in overcoming both fear and suffering. From a Buddhist perspective, the Buddha taught that suffering arises from our clinging to what we desire and our aversion to what we fear. These attachments create a duality in our minds. We want to hold on to what we love and avoid what we don't. The suffering comes when we realize that neither of these is under our control. We cannot stop the world from changing, and we cannot prevent ourselves from facing discomfort and loss. Once we accept that suffering is an inevitable part of life, we can begin to change our relationship with it. Instead of resisting it or fearing it, we can approach it with compassion. When we recognize that suffering is a shared human experience, we can offer ourselves and others the compassion needed to navigate it. This recognition of shared suffering is crucial. Fear and suffering often lead to feelings of isolation, as if we are the only ones who experience them. But when we understand that fear is a universal experience, we shift our mindset from one of isolation to one of connection. This shift is fundamental to the Buddhist concept of interdependence, which teaches that all beings are interconnected. Just as our suffering is shared, so too is our capacity for compassion. By offering compassion to ourselves and others, we transcend the self-centered thinking that perpetuates fear and suffering. This, in turn, opens the door to healing and transformation. One of the most powerful tools in addressing fear is the recognition that it is often an illusion. Our minds are prone to projecting worst-case scenarios, imagining outcomes that may never come to pass. This tendency to imagine the worst is a product of our fear-based thinking, but it is not grounded in reality. Fear arises from our mind's ability to create stories about what might happen in the future. These stories are often exaggerated and not based on any concrete evidence. By questioning whether the fear is based on reality, we can begin to see it for what it truly is, an unfounded mental projection. A great example of this comes from the life of Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX. Musk is known for his ambitious goals, such as colonizing Mars and revolutionizing the automobile industry. These goals are often met with skepticism and fear, both from the public and from within his own companies. Yet Musk has repeatedly demonstrated an ability to push past these fears and doubts. He has faced near bankruptcy multiple times, and yet he continues to move forward with bold, even risky, projects. In one interview, Musk explained that he had learned to embrace failure and uncertainty, knowing that these are simply parts of the process of innovation. He has learned not to be controlled by the fear of failure, recognizing it as an illusion, a projection that has no bearing on the present moment. This ability to confront fear as an illusion is central to Buddhist practice. In Buddhism, fear is seen as a product of ignorance, a misperception of reality. When we fear, we are not seeing the situation as it truly is. Instead, we are seeing a distorted version of reality, colored by our attachments and aversions. This is why mindfulness is so important in overcoming fear. Mindfulness helps us observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment, allowing us to see them clearly. and without distortion. By bringing our awareness to the present moment, we can recognize that the fear we are experiencing is not a reflection of the present reality, but a mental construct based on past experiences and future anxieties. Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate, offers another example of someone who has faced fear and suffering with extraordinary courage. Malala was shot by the Taliban for advocating girls' education in Pakistan. After surviving the attack, she could have been consumed by fear and despair. Instead, she chose to continue her advocacy for education, even in the face of ongoing threats to her life. In interviews, Malala has spoken about the importance of education in overcoming fear and oppression. She understands that fear, while natural, is an illusion created by those who seek to control and suppress others. By standing firm in her beliefs and refusing to succumb to fear, Malala has become a global symbol of resilience and courage. She embodies the Buddhist teaching that suffering and fear are part of the human experience, but they do not have to define us. The practice of questioning the reality of our fears and recognizing their illusory nature can be incredibly liberating. Fear loses its power when we no longer give it authority over our actions. Instead of being driven by fear, we can choose to act with wisdom and compassion, knowing that fear is just a passing emotion, not a permanent state. By shifting our perspective, we reclaim our sense of agency and control, allowing us to face life's challenges with clarity and courage. This shift is not easy, but it is possible. It requires mindfulness, self-awareness, and the willingness to confront our fears head-on. Through these practices, we can move beyond the illusion of fear and embrace the freedom that comes with living fully in the present moment. In conclusion, the understanding of fear and suffering through the lens of Buddhism offers profound insight into how we can transform these universal experiences. By recognizing that both fear and suffering are rooted in our attachments and projections, we can begin to shift our relationship with them. The key to overcoming fear lies in questioning its reality and recognizing it as an illusion. Through mindfulness and compassion, we can navigate fear and suffering with greater ease and clarity, ultimately finding peace and freedom in the present moment. Fear is often amplified by our thoughts, which tend to focus on the past or future. And this is where mindfulness becomes a powerful tool for transformation. The practice of mindfulness, central to both Buddhist teachings and modern psychological approaches, helps us anchor ourselves in the present moment, where the illusion of fear loses its power. Fear thrives in a mental space of what-ifs or could-have-beens, where the past is regretted and the future is feared. This cyclical nature of fear can be debilitating if we allow ourselves to stay trapped in these mental projections. However, mindfulness is the practice of being fully present, of observing our thoughts without judgment, and of cultivating awareness of our surroundings and inner state. Mindfulness creates a space where we are able to witness fear without identifying with it, without becoming consumed by it. Just like watching a storm from a safe distance, we can see fear for what it is, a fleeting emotional reaction rather than a permanent condition. In this way, mindfulness offers us clarity and peace. For example, consider someone like Oprah Winfrey, who has experienced profound adversity throughout her life, including childhood trauma and early career setbacks. Yet she has often spoken about how mindfulness, particularly through her practice of meditation, helped her find clarity in moments of crisis. By staying present, Oprah learned to focus on the process of her work, not the anticipated fears or doubts about the outcome. This ability to return to the present moment, despite overwhelming external pressures or personal challenges, enabled her to rise above her fears and find success on her own terms. Buddhism teaches that mindfulness is not just about focusing on the present moment, but also observing our thoughts and emotions without attachment. When we observe our thoughts, we are able to distance ourselves from the storm of fear This allows us to engage with life and make decisions from a place of calmness rather than impulsive anxiety. By cultivating mindfulness, we can break free from the habit of identifying with our fearful thoughts, which often seem more powerful than they truly are. The Buddha emphasized this idea in his teachings on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where practitioners are encouraged to observe their body, feelings, mind, and mental objects in a detached manner. This observational stance helps in recognizing the transient nature of all phenomena, including our fears. Another aspect of mindfulness is the ability to let go of attachment, which is directly linked to fear. In many ways, attachment is the root of much suffering. The more tightly we grip something, the more likely we are to fear losing it. This is not just true of physical possessions, but also of relationships, social status, and even ideas of who we believe ourselves to be. Buddhism teaches that attachment leads to suffering because it fosters the belief that we can control or permanently possess things, which is, in essence, an illusion. When we are attached to outcomes, people, or possessions, we inadvertently invite fear into our lives. The fear of loss, failure, or change arises from this attachment. A great example of this concept is the life of Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple. Jobs was known for his intense commitment to the success of his company, and his drive was often fueled by a vision of control over Apple's innovations. However, he experienced many challenges, including being ousted from the very company he created. Jobs' experience highlights the destructive power of attachment. His return to Apple, however, marked a shift in his mindset. In his later years, he seemed to adopt a more detached, mindful approach to leadership, focusing more on process than on control. This shift is reflected in his famous remark about following your intuition and doing what you love. Jobs realized that true success wasn't about controlling every outcome, but about engaging deeply with the process and letting go of the need for perfection or certainty. In Buddhism, the act of letting go is often symbolized by the metaphor of holding sand in your hand. If you grip the sand too tightly, it slips through your fingers. Similarly, if you hold too tightly to people, achievements, or expectations, you only set yourself up for fear and disappointment. True freedom comes from recognizing that we do not control life's outcomes, but we can control how we respond to them. By letting go of attachment, we open ourselves to the possibility of experiencing life without the constant undercurrent of fear. One of the most profound teachings related to this is the idea of non-attachment. In the Buddhist concept of anatta, or no self, this doctrine asserts that there is no permanent, unchanging self. We are not the sum of our possessions, relationships, or accomplishments. Letting go of the attachment to these external markers of identity frees us from the suffering that comes with clinging to them. For instance, take the example of a successful actor or public figure who experiences a major loss or fall from grace. Their identity, so long tied to their public persona, may come crashing down if their fame fades, or if they encounter scandal. However, those who have cultivated detachment, who understand that they are not their status, possessions, or reputation, can weather these storms with greater ease. Patience is another essential quality in managing fear. Fear is often the result of impatience. We fear the unknown because we want certainty. We want quick answers, and we fear waiting. In this sense, impatience feeds fear by creating anxiety around things that have not yet unfolded. In contrast, patience is the antidote to this kind of fear-based thinking. It is the understanding that all things, both difficult and easy, have their time and season. Growth, both personal and professional, takes time, and challenges, no matter how formidable, will resolve in their own time. Consider the example of a person like Nelson Mandela, whose life was marked by both immense suffering and profound patience. Mandela spent 27 years in prison for his activism against apartheid in South Africa, and throughout those years, he endured extreme hardship. However, his patience, his ability to accept the timing of his life struggles, was key to his eventual success. He never rushed for immediate answers, nor did he give in to fear and frustration. Mandela's patience taught him the value of trusting the process. Even when the end goal seemed far away or uncertain, patience is, in many ways, a practice of trust. Trust that things will unfold as they are meant to, even if we cannot see the entire picture. It requires relinquishing the need for immediate results, and instead, learning to embrace the ebb and flow of life. This is particularly important when facing fear, as the very essence of fear is the desire for certainty and control. When we practice patience, we accept that uncertainty is part of the process, and that fear does not need to dominate our actions. Buddhist teachings on patience, such as in the Perfections, Paramithas, emphasize that patience is a quality that is developed over time. It is not something that can be cultivated overnight, but it requires consistent effort and mindfulness. In facing challenges, patience encourages us to let go of the need for immediate answers, to allow time for things to unfold in their own way. In this sense, patience allows us to face life's uncertainties with a sense of calmness, knowing that fear will pass in its own time, just like any other emotion. In conclusion, cultivating mindfulness, letting go of attachment, and cultivating patience are essential practices for overcoming fear. Mindfulness brings us back to the present moment, where fear loses its grip. By observing our thoughts without judgment, we can create distance between ourselves and the emotional storm of fear. Letting go of attachment frees us from the fear of loss, failure, and change, as we understand that true freedom comes from focusing on the effort and process rather than controlling the outcome. Patience allows us to face uncertainty with trust and calmness, knowing that all things, including fear, will pass in their own time. These practices, deeply rooted in Buddhist teachings, offer us a way to navigate life's challenges with clarity, peace, and resilience. As we've explored together today, fear is not a permanent condition. It's a temporary wave that comes and goes. The power to change our relationship with fear lies in our ability to understand its true nature, detach from our unhealthy attachments, and cultivate a sense of mindfulness that brings us back to the present moment. The more we embrace impermanence and recognize that suffering is a part of life, the less power fear has over us. Buddhist teachings have shown us that fear often arises when we cling to what we wish to hold on to or resist what we fear. But what if, instead of gripping onto outcomes and expectations, we allowed ourselves to surrender? Imagine a life where you no longer fear the unknown or the inevitable changes life brings. You would be free to experience life fully, without the anxiety that often accompanies attachment. This shift isn't easy, but it's possible, and it starts with mindfulness. By returning to the present moment, we can see our fears for what they truly are, often just mental projections that have no real basis in reality. When we practice mindfulness, we stop reacting impulsively to fear and instead, we respond with awareness, clarity, and wisdom. We move from being controlled by our emotions to becoming the observer of them, recognizing their impermanence and allowing them to pass without letting them dictate our lives. But mindfulness isn't just about the big moments. It's about the small, everyday decisions. It's about recognizing when you're holding on to fear or attachment and choosing to let go. It's about developing the patience to sit with discomfort without rushing to escape it. As we discussed today, patience is essential. When we are impatient, we exacerbate our fears by trying to control outcomes that are beyond our control. But when we cultivate patience, we trust the natural flow of life, understanding that all challenges and fears are temporary, and in time, they will resolve. You don't have to be a Buddhist monk or practitioner to embrace these principles. Some of the most influential leaders and thinkers of our time, from the Dalai Lama to Oprah Winfrey, have embodied these teachings in their own lives. Both teach us that fear can be overcome by accepting it, understanding it, and letting it go. The Dalai Lama, for example, often speaks about how we must embrace compassion and mindfulness, which can free us from the suffering caused by our attachments. Oprah, too, has shared her own journey of overcoming fear through mindfulness and releasing the need to control everything. As we wrap up today's exploration of fear and mindfulness, remember this: fear doesn't define you. It's a part of life, but it's also something you can transcend. Through the Buddhist practice of mindfulness, you can learn to live fully in the present, to detach from your fears, and to cultivate the patience necessary to see beyond the illusions of the mind. And now, it's time to take action. Start by practicing mindfulness in your daily life. Observe your fears without judgment, and remember that they are just passing thoughts. Practice letting go of attachments and trusting that everything in life is temporary, fear included. You'll find that, over time, you'll feel lighter, freer, and more at peace with yourself and the world around you. If this video has resonated with you and helped you gain a deeper understanding of how to navigate fear and suffering, I'd love for you to take the next step. Like this video, share it with someone who could benefit from these teachings, and subscribe to our channel for more videos on how to live a mindful, peaceful, and intentional life. Don't let fear or attachment hold you back from living fully. Embrace the present, embrace impermanence, and start your journey toward a freer, more peaceful you today. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to sharing more insights with you as we continue to explore how Buddhist wisdom can transform our lives.